Why would an ant choose to walk 4 times slower than necessary? Can a creature with only 250,000 neurons actually teach? What did scientists discover that changed 50 years of debate? What if the world's first real teacher wasn't human? Could a tiny ant understand teaching better than we do?
She walks 4 times slower than she could. She stops every few steps. She waits for a tap on her back before she moves on. The first true teacher in the natural world is an ant, and most human classrooms still don't do what she does. Her name in the scientific literature is Temnothorax albipennis. She is less than 3 millimeters long. She has under 250,000 neurons in her entire body. And in 2006, a team at the University of Bristol published a result in the journal Nature that quietly rewrote 50 years of debate about what teaching actually is. What did the Bristol team find? Why does it rewrite the debate? Here is the question scientists had been arguing about. Do ants teach each other? More broadly, does any animal except humans actually teach? The question sounds simple. It is not. For most of the 20th century, teaching was treated as something only humans did. Animals could learn. Animals could imitate. But teaching, the act of one individual deliberately changing their behavior so that another individual learns faster, was thought to be ours alone. The argument was not just academic. It went to the heart of what makes the human mind special. If teaching is unique to us, then language, culture, and civilization rest on a uniquely human foundation. If it is not, then a piece of what we thought was ours has been quietly happening all along in places we never looked. The problem was nobody had a clean definition. Teaching was being measured by intuition. What counted as teaching in a chimpanzee? In a meerkat? In a bird showing its chick how to crack a nut? The field needed rules. In 1992, two biologists, Tim Caro and Mark Hauser, wrote a paper in the Quarterly Review of Biology that set those rules. They proposed 3 criteria. To call a behavior teaching, it had to satisfy all 3. What happens when you apply those 3 criteria to an ant in a Bristol laboratory? That is where the story turns. What are the 3 criteria? Does the ant pass all 3? Here is the test Caro and Hauser proposed. To call a behavior teaching, 3 things must be true. First, the teacher must change her behavior only in the presence of a learner. She does not act this way alone. Second, the teaching must cost the teacher something. Time, energy, exposure to risk. Real teaching is not free. Third, the learner must, as a result, acquire the skill or the knowledge faster than they would have on their own. 3 criteria: cost, presence dependence, accelerated learning. For 14 years, no non-human animal had been shown to satisfy all 3. Then came Nigel Franks and Tom Richardson at the University of Bristol. They were studying a small woodland ant called Temnothorax albipennis. These ants live in tiny colonies, sometimes just a few dozen individuals, inside cracks in rocks. When the colony finds a new food source, or needs to move to a new nest, scouts have to bring the other ants there. The question is how. What Franks and Richardson observed was something called tandem running. One ant, the leader, would set off toward the food. A second ant, the follower, would walk close behind, often touching the leader's hind legs with her antennae. And the leader would walk slowly, painfully slowly, roughly 4 times slower than she would walk if she were alone. She would walk a few steps, then stop. She would wait. The follower behind her was looking around. She was memorizing the landmarks. When the follower had learned enough, she would tap the leader's abdomen with her antennae. Only then would the leader continue. Stop. Wait.
Top.
Walk. Stop. Wait.
Top.
Walk. This is tandem running ant communication, and it is one of the most carefully documented examples of bidirectional feedback in any animal that is not a human. The Bristol team did the experiment carefully. They watched what happened when the follower was removed. The leader stopped teaching. The leader ran at full speed. So the behavior was presence-dependent. They measured the time cost. The leader took roughly 4 times longer to reach the food when teaching than when foraging alone. So the behavior was costly, and they compared followers who had been led to the food with followers who had simply been picked up and dropped near it. The taught ants found the food again much faster on their own. So the followers had genuinely learned. 3 criteria: cost, presence dependence, accelerated learning. All 3 satisfied by a creature with 250,000 neurons. How did the broader scientific community react? What does it mean for our definition of teaching? Many people think the headline here is just that ants are smarter than we thought. The actual research says something more uncomfortable than that. The Franks and Richardson paper, published in Nature in January 2006, was titled simply Teaching in Tandem Running Ants. It set off a debate that ran for years. Some researchers pushed back. They argued the ants were not really teaching, they were just 2 individuals coordinating in a way that looked like teaching from the outside. They argued the criteria were too generous, that if you applied them strictly, the ant did not really intend to teach. She just did what she did. But here is what the critics missed. The Caro and Hauser criteria were never about intention. They were never about what the teacher was thinking. They were a behavioral definition, a way to measure teaching from the outside, the way a stranger to the human species might measure it. Because intention is invisible. We cannot measure what a chimpanzee intends. We cannot measure what an ant intends. All we can measure is what the behavior does. And by that measure, the ant teaches. In 2008, Will Hoppitt and his colleagues, writing in the journal Trends in Ecology and Evolution, published a major review of the field. They examined every claimed case of animal teaching across the literature. Meerkats teaching pups to handle scorpions, cheetahs teaching cubs to hunt, pied babblers teaching juveniles to associate calls with food. The Hoppitt review placed the Bristol ants near the center of animal teaching behavior research. It also did something else. It pointed out gently that if you take the Caro and Hauser definition seriously, much of what happens in a modern lecture hall does not qualify as teaching. Why? Because lecture and test models often fail criterion 1. The lecturer does not meaningfully change her behavior based on whether a student is learning. The lecture proceeds at the same pace in the same direction, whether the back row is taking notes or asleep. There is no tap on the back. There is no waiting. The ant in Bristol is doing something the lecture hall is not. She is letting the learner set the pace. She is responding to a signal from the student that says, "I have it, you can go on." That is the part the science writers almost universally missed. The interesting question is not whether the ant teaches. The interesting question is whether we do. If lectures fail the test, what counts as real teaching for humans? Why do we teach the way we do? Here is the central question, then. If a 3mm ant satisfies the 3 classical criteria for teaching, and a modern lecture hall often does not, then what have we been doing in our classrooms for the last 200 years? The answer is not flattering, but it is not new either. Educators have known for decades that the lecture format is a weak teaching technology. The research is consistent. Students retain only a small fraction of what they hear in passive lectures. They retain dramatically more when teaching is interactive, when the teacher adjusts pace, when students ask questions, when there is a feedback loop. This is well established in education research. What is striking is that an ant has been doing it correctly the whole time. The reason humans built lecture halls is not that lectures work well. It is that they scale. One teacher can broadcast to 300 students. One ant cannot. The tandem running ant teaches 1 follower at a time, slowly, with every step calibrated to whether the learner is keeping up. The 4 times slower walking speed is not a quirk. It is the cost of doing teaching properly. What the ant has that the modern lecture often does not is bandwidth in both directions. The follower has a way to tell the leader, "Stop, I have not understood yet." The leader has a way to receive that signal and respond to it. The signal is small, a tap of the antennae on the abdomen, but it is a real signal and it changes what the teacher does next. When you ask, "Do ants teach each other?" you have been quietly asking a question about yourself, about every classroom you ever sat in, about every meeting where a more senior person broadcast information in your direction without pausing to ask if you were following. The 250,000 neuron ant has solved a problem that human institutions, with all our universities and all our textbooks, still routinely fail to solve. Not because the ant is smarter, because the ant is honest about what teaching requires. It requires waiting. What would it mean to actually teach like the ant? Is the ant doing something humans have forgotten? There is something to sit with here. The ant in the Bristol laboratory is not trying to be wise. She is not trying to be patient. She is doing what works for her species in her colony on the scale of millimeters for a payoff of a few molecules of sugar. She did not invent the principle of feedback. She inherited it the way every social creature inherits the rules that allow social creatures to function. The rest we have built up around her in journal articles and conferences and arguments about what teaching is. What is uncomfortable is that we did not need the ant to tell us. The principle has been visible all along, in every good tutor, every patient parent, every mentor who knew when to slow down and when to wait. We have always known what teaching looks like when it works. We have just built institutions that, for reasons of cost and scale, mostly do something else and call it the same word. The ant does not know any of this. She walks 4 times slower than she could. She stops. She waits for the tap. She moves on. She teaches the only way teaching has ever worked. What other ancient solutions to coordination has the insect world quietly perfected? The Bristol ant is not the only insect to have solved a problem human institutions still struggle with. A few hundred kilometers south of where her colony lives, in the savannas of southern Africa, millions of termites are quietly building cathedrals up to 9 meters tall, with internal air conditioning, no architect, and no central plan. How they do it and what it reveals about why human organizations so often fail at the same kind of coordination is the next thing we will look at.